You're listening to Making Data Simple, where we make the world of data effortless, relevant, and yes, even fun.
Folks, welcome back to the series, Making Data Simple. This is Al Martin here. Today's topic is data science in aviation. We can maybe spend all day because I fly a lot, so I may have a lot of questions for Yianni Gamvros. Hi, Yanni. How are you?
Hi, good.
That's Yanni, like the composer. Did you know that our producer, Kate Nichols, she's a huge Yanni fan, and I am told that she's went to a Yanni concert. It's the only one that I know of, but she must. I presume you're a different Yanni.
I am a different Yanni. Yes, absolutely.
Very good. I had to embarrass her while she's listening on here. So I've got a lot of friends that are pilots, so this is going to be an interesting conversation as far as I'm concerned. And I ride in a lot of planes. I think I've been traveling every week. I got to tell you, the last flight I was on, we took off from LaGuardia. It was the worst turbulence that I've ever had. I mean, I was going up and down, and it felt like as I'm coming up, it felt like we were hitting something or something, because it would just like shake, just repetitively shake, and then stop, and then do it again, and it was terrible. Anyway, so then finally I got up. About 10 minutes later, it calmed down, and I went to the washroom. And when I went, they hadn't turned off the seatbelt sign yet, and I said to the flight attendant, I said, "I hope you don't mind. I've got to go to the washroom after that." And she goes, "Well, you know what that was, don't you?" And I said, "Turbulence?" And she goes, No. We were hitting jet wash from the last plane.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And I was like, I wish you wouldn't have told me that. She goes, "Well, didn't you feel us turn sideways very quickly?" And I said, "Yeah, I felt that, but I didn't know we were hitting jet wash." She said, "Yeah, we had them backed up too close together, and there was a plane in front of us." So hopefully with data, you're going to tell me how to solve that. No, I don't know if you can do that. But speaking of airlines, introduce yourself if you would, and tell us what experiences that you have with the airlines and what you've learned, and then we'll jump into data science.
Sure. So currently my role in IBM is the Global Enablement Leader for Data Science and Machine Learning. So I teach our sales representatives how to talk about data science, how to present the value proposition, and how to present the key differentiating points for the IBM portfolio. My experiences in the airline, just like you, I used to be a road warrior, not anymore. I currently have a 8-month-old at home. So for the last year or so, I haven't been traveling as much. But I do have a lot of experience from the time when I was a consultant, a data science consultant, and talked to a lot of different airlines about the different challenges they face. And we looked at several issues, operational most of the time, and we looked at the back end and how they're dealing with those issues and how we can help them, how data science can help them.
Hey, very good. So, look, when I'm flying, I'm thinking about all kinds of things, and usually, I don't know, I'm not, usually it's not always a great experience. I'm just trying to get from point A to point B. But I got to believe there's data that we should or could be using to better that experience. Can you talk about, the importance of data in the aviation industry, and then we can go from there?
Sure, absolutely. So, there are a lot of things that the airlines are tracking, right? And most of the time, they actually do a pretty good job. And most of the time, you don't even know that they have all these models and all this data that's being accumulated in the back, and the way they're using them. You don't even know that that's happening behind the scenes, right? So, the one thing that you might notice, or since you're a business traveler, actually, you might not be as price sensitive. But for most people out there, when they go out, their first touch point with the airline is the ticket price, right? And in many situations today, you can find a very, very cheap price. And actually, most people are really happy about that. And that's actually, there's a lot of data science behind the scenes to actually get you that very cheap fare, right? And then there's everything else else that happens to make sure that your flight leaves on time, the airplane is ready, the equipment is ready, all the maintenance checks have been done, the plane passes all the FAA checks, and the pilot and crew are certified to fly that plane, and the ground crew does all their checks and all their kind of final tasks and prep for the plane on time, right? So all that happens behind the scenes, but actually there's a lot of operational processing. There's a lot of operational data behind the scenes that drive all these decisions, even before you actually take off, right? And then after you take off, there's obviously a lot of things that the dispatchers and the pilots are tracking, specifically with the weather, to make sure that the routing is such that you don't hit all the turbulence spots, right? And then that you get there on time through in the safest and fastest way possible.
Well, what I've heard, and you tell me if this is correct, but I know IoT is still in its infancy for most part of the industry, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, connected car has a long way to go. Being in a smart building, a truly smart building, top to bottom, still long way to go. But from what I understand, maybe you can confirm this or not, but the engines on the jets that we're taking are very well connected, and they go back to a base where people are monitoring, everything top to bottom within these engines itself. Is that accurate? And could you?
That is correct. Actually, the engines are one part of the plane that's actually much better connected than anything else on the aircraft. Actually, in many situations today, and for many aircraft types, the people in the back that are riding through their Wi-Fi, they have better information than the pilots up top. So unfortunately, that still is an issue. But the way that the airlines counterbalance that is they have people on the ground that the dispatchers that are basically looking at weather systems, they're looking at routing data, and then they're informing the pilots, right? So yes, we're not fully there in terms of IoT connectivity, but we're getting there.
So are you a pilot yourself?
Oh, no, I'm not. Just an enthusiast.
All right. Well, fair enough. And are you working some of the data science within these airlines?
Yes. So some of the projects that I've been personally involved with have to do with, for example, matching pilots and crews with the airline schedule. That's a very, very complex problem to solve. You need to make sure, obviously, that you have the right pilot that's certified for the right equipment type, and you give enough time to the pilot to go from one flight to the next, and then you give them enough time overnight to rest, and hopefully you get them at the end of the day, hopefully you get them back to their home base, right? So they can sleep at home. Obviously, that's not always possible, but that's the ideal situation, right? And then there are other issues with ground control, right? So making sure you assign the right gate to the right flight, and the gate can support the equipment at the gate can support the flight, and you don't have this very, very large jets sitting right next to each other, and kind of there might be some safety concerns there. So that's another project that we did, or another project that we're doing actually in collaboration with weather.com is to recommend which flights get diverted once a big weather system hits an airport and it's going to impact the capacity of the airport to accept new flights, right? And so you have to slow down the landing rate for that airport, and then you have to figure out basically which flights get diverted and where do they go.
So, but tell me, here's what I don't understand. What's the difference between traditional analytics that are being performed on the data that you just described, or what is really the magic of data science coming in and making this assessments? I mean, more like machine learning models that you're using. Right. Which is which?
Right. No, very good point. Very good point. So, so there's actually a ton of traditional analytics, if you want to call it that, and BI, business intelligence, that the dispatchers on the ground and the operations people, the maintenance people, everybody that is looking at the back end of operations is looking at, which is just basically gives them just a current state, right? A view of what's currently happening, where data science and machine learning and some of the other methods that airlines are using, like, for example, mathematical programming, constraint programming, which are other data science methods not as popular as machine learning right now is, they're looking to get recommendations from those models and algorithms into the hands of the dispatchers and the operators so that they can more quickly react to very dynamic situations, and they can have these recommendations in front of them, and then they can make the judgment call as to how I'm going to deal with that special situation that has just come up, right? So that's the difference of the more advanced data science models and algorithms, providing recommendations and providing instruction to the back-end operators.
Are these data science algorithms currently in use today? Are they future state kind of things? Is that where we're going relative to data science specifically?
Right. So in most cases, there's only partial adoption, right? So in some cases, they're being used today, but there are many, many other processes and operations where they're being built right now.
All right, so you had mentioned something. It's kind of a silly question in some sense. You said there are folks on the ground. You referred to that. Where are these folks? And the reason I ask where these folks are, because when I think of data science, I think I think of models, I think of machine learning, I think of projecting and anticipating, predicting, and I could be proven wrong, but if to do that right, you have to have the data science seeing these models working and then being able to better the models as they go while the software kind of betters itself, if that makes sense. So you correct me, my thought process there, if you will.
Yeah, so the operators are sitting at the network operation centers for all the airlines. All the airlines have at least one or two of them, and they have an army of people there, right, that's doing all the dispatching, and it's tracking all the planes, tracking weather, tracking all the pilots and crews and where they're going to stay overnight and, what's their next flight and so on and so forth, right? But you're right. So at the same time, they are collecting all these data, right? And the data scientists within the airlines are kind of sitting to the side. They're seeing how existing processes are work today, and they try to inject basically technology and trying to inject these models, the predictive models, the operations models, in the hands of the dispatchers in order to help them out.
What is the most profound change because of data science, if any, that's went in so far today already that we should be feeling?
Sure. So actually, it started quite some time ago, right? So it has to do with pricing. So back in the 80s, I think it was American Airlines basically that pioneered the very dynamic pricing. They call it yield management, where basically they keep track of their seat inventory, they keep track of the prices of competitors, they keep track of demand, and they also forecast demand, and they forecast how sensitive people are to prices. And they've kind of figured very quickly that people are very sensitive to prices, and that's why they need to constantly update the prices for the seats they have on the airplane.
What about the customer experience? So now we're done with pricing. We purchased the ticket. The overall customer experience. Here's what I can't understand. I'll just tell you, why is it that there are so many overbooked situations that still exist today? I was just I was just getting on a flight the other day, and look, they went up to over $1,000 if somebody would give up that seat. Obviously, they've learned from recent events that you've got to go to the point where somebody finally bites on that offer. But why does it even have to get to that point if we're heading into big data science land?
Right. Very good point. And here's another point of view. If you ever get on a flight and the flight is half empty, right? You find empty seats, then the data scientists at that airline are not doing a good job, right? So overbooking is the result of data scientists actually doing a very good job and figuring out the fact that in many situations, people just miss their flight, right? So they might cancel last minute, or their plans might change, or they might be stuck in traffic on the way to the airport and they just might miss their flight, right? So when that happens, they want to avoid that seat flying empty to its destination. And the reason they do that, the way they do that, is by actually booking additional passengers. So in most cases, I want to say in close to 100% of the cases, all flights at some point are overbooked. But then as you get closer to the takeoff time, then you have these last minute cancellations. And then most of the time it works out that you have just the right number of passengers and the right number of seats. Now, yes, sometimes it doesn't work out, and we hear about it through the speakers when they're trying to find a volunteer. And that's when you have those incentives come in.
So are you actually making a case to me that because there are so few overbooked such situations that we see, that's actually a testament to how well they're doing in terms of pushing the envelope as close as they can get to an absolute or a plane at capacity?
Exactly. That is absolutely right. Remember, anytime you get on a flight and there's even one empty seat, then someone hasn't done their job correctly in the data science department of that airline.
I'm going to have to think about that. All right. So what can we expect in the future, though? We're putting these things in place. It sounds like, we're just on the cusp, at least as far as I can tell, unless you can convince me otherwise. What should we start seeing here in the near future that should excite us?
Right. So it will be transparent to the end user, right? So the end user will just go online, book their ticket, and their flight will leave on time, and it will land on time, and they will be on their way, right? But behind the scenes, what airlines are doing is basically making sure, again, that they're taking into consideration all the operational constraints, all the safety constraints, the maintenance is done right. Many of the problems that airlines currently have to do with all the maintenance checks that the FAA imposes on them. And they have to ensure that they get that plane off of the operational schedule and get it to a maintenance facility for people to work on it, right? So all these processes right now, or a big percentage of those processes, is happening manually. And what I expect to see in the future is that more and more of these processes will actually be driven by more advanced data science models and algorithms, and they will track the complexity of all these moving variables. They will look ahead, and they will provide recommendations basically to the operators and the maintenance team, the operations teams, the dispatchers, all those guys on the ground.
So I correlate that to, more on-time flights, no more sitting for 60 minutes on a tarmac, waiting for all the other flights to leave because of whatever reason, and continued pricing optimization.
Yeah, so actually, I think pricing optimization is one of the reasons why some people have these travel horror stories, right? So actually, a friend of mine very recently flew from Chicago to San Francisco. He was flying with his wife, two very young kids, and he was telling me that he was having this kind of horrible flight, right, where they basically got to the airplane. They weren't sitting all together. There was no entertainment, so his 3-year-old was kind of nagging throughout the flight, and he had just one of these horrible experiences. And when he told me that, I asked him, my first question was, okay, so how did you book your flight? And basically he said, I went to the search engine and then I picked the cheapest flight that came back, right? And, we as consumers have been doing that, right? And we've been doing that to such an extent that even maybe a $5 fare difference is actually making a difference in the ticket that we're going to purchase, right? And so basically I told him, well, there you have it, right? You basically had the experience that you paid for. So actually, it's more of a mismatch it's more of a communications mismatch, right? So airlines are kind of pushing away out of the list price, out of the basic price for each seat. They're pushing out some of the additional amenities and some of the additional services that they offer, right? And most consumers are actually not aware of that, right? So they pay for just the basic seat, and then everything else is essentially extra.
Yeah. Are we getting to the point we're going to be paying for everything extra? It's heading in that direction, is it not?
Exactly. And I think we as consumers have essentially, done it to ourselves, right? I mean, because since have this very constant and very specific behavior whenever we book our tickets, I think it's going to go that way for sure.
Seems like there's still a lot of opportunity to be had here, though, because, I think this is a tough business for many reasons. To your point, we want it all for the cheapest price possible. But just the other day I was rebooked when I was in the air. The only problem is I was rebooked like the following day because my next lag there was something wrong with it or whatever. But so then I had to get off the plane and then I had to find the desk and I found a better option. But hopefully the machine learning eventually would take over such that, it'll learn my preferences, what I need, what I'm willing to accept, what I'm not willing to accept. So it'll present me with the options I'm most inclined to take, either whether that's just the travel options and or, what seat I want in terms of, the travel itself, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I know for a fact that actually there are some solutions like that in play today, currently, with some of the airlines. But actually, most of the time, they just look at rebooking everyone automatically once the flight gets canceled and kind of they try to do the best out of that. And obviously they give preference to passengers that have higher status with an airline. And, if you're a casual traveler, obviously you're not going to get preferential treatment. But it sounds like you travel quite a bit. So I'm surprised that, maybe your airline didn't really have that in place.
Well, in fairness, I think this year I've been on time more than any other year. That probably is still 40% not on time, if that makes sense. So it's 60% on time, right. and it's improved. But there's a lot of weather implications. There's a lot of different things. As long as it's safe, I'm pretty happy, I guess.
Actually, yeah, Al, that was going to be my other point. That we can write all the data science models and we can kind of throw all the math we want at the problem, but then you have a storm over kind of major hub, right? And or a storm system moving throughout the country that the flight paths have to cross, and then all of that goes out the window, right? You're not going to avoid the delay when your airport capacity goes down by 50% because of the storm or more.
Well, that was actually, I would expect that some of the best opportunity to really get innovative would be to match up the data science. And you mentioned a little bit of this earlier, I thought, with, the weather data and the weather patterns and making, somewhat on-demand decisions based on that information models, so you've got the weather model, you've also got, everything else you put in, where the flight's going, who else, they're going to be waiting for on the tarmac, whatever the case may be. But I think putting all that together, I think would bear huge fruit.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yep.
When I typically look at a maturity model for data, it goes from operations, where back office type item or issues. Then it goes to warehousing. Then it goes to more data science, and then new models beyond that. Are almost all the airlines right now, are they pushing into the data science area, do you believe? Or still some of them stuck in back office or warehousing? Where are they really at from a maturity curve perspective? I
think they're close to pushing at the new model envelope. I think especially the major airlines for sure have big data science departments with a lot of people working there, very knowledgeable people that have studied, hours and hours at school on how to build the models and, what are the latest approaches and the latest algorithms. Some of the other airlines that might be low-cost airlines maybe outsource some of that to independent software vendors and other packages that are out there that have some vertical solutions that might do some data science kind of, within off-the-shelf kind of data science, if I can say that.
I know that there's some videos out there on Watson Analytics around aviation. Is there any one that you'd recommend?
Sure, yeah. So there's a great video actually where, it tells the story basically of a passenger kind of waiting for their flight, and they're not an expert. They're kind of a very novice, data scientist, and they want to analyze some data and analyze some flight delay data and Twitter sentiment data, and Watson Analytics makes that very, very easy for them.
Fantastic. So look, I've got a problem that I need you to work on aviation. So in addition to the last flight I was on, so I go turn my rental car in, and the rental car center now, because these airports are getting bigger and bigger, is like 3 miles, it seems like, from the actual terminal. So I take a train, and I had like 3 or 4 or 5 stops. I get to the terminal. I walk probably another half a mile to get to the TSA pre-check. I get through the TSA pre-check. I look in my jacket, and I see the car keys.
Oh, no.
So and I had no place to drop these things off. How can we predict that? And somehow, I think then you could throw these things in. It was very, very painful because I had to retrack everything I just talked about. Barely made my flight. So think about that. That needs to be solved, because with these keyless cars, that is going to be a major issue. I'm here to tell you. 3 more questions, lightning round, but anything else you'd leave the listeners with in terms of data and aviation?
Yeah, I think what can make your flight experience much better is to really know what you're paying for, right? In that kind of basic price. And if you are someone that's traveling or planning to travel more than 4 times a year, then you should really pick, your own favorite airline and kind of stick with it, because there are tremendous advantages if you stick with an airline and you go and kind of get into that first layer or level of status with them. Then you can get some benefits out of that. So I think that can be very beneficial, and just get what you know what you're getting for the price that you're paying. I think that's very, very basic.
All right. Terrific. Thank you. Hey, so I want to do a little bit of a lightning round. It gets a little bit more personal. Just a couple of questions. It'll be all good. First question is, what's the most exciting thing you're working on right now?
So right now, I'm building all this enablement material for next year for all the IBMers to study on, which is not that exciting at all.
All right. Well, let me rephrase the question. What's the most exciting thing that you've worked on around data science personally with the aviation industry?
So for the aviation industry specifically, we did a project. We were designing this project really that had to do with which flights you assign to what gate, right? So I mentioned that a little bit earlier in the podcast, but I thought that was pretty interesting because we don't give much thought to it, right? And it seems like a pretty basic problem. I mean, you have a plane landing, you have a gate that's open, and they can say, okay, well, I'm just going to, take that plane over to that gate. But it turns out there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of complexity. You might have another plane right next to it that might need some additional space. So you might not be able to kind of put those 2 planes right next to each other. You might have to do some reshuffling of the gates if you have some delays. And that's when it gets really interesting, right? Which of your gates do you change? Which of your flights do you change? And how do you ensure that the new and the old gate for the flight that you're going to change is actually pretty close to each other, right? You don't want to make these announcements over the speaker where you're forcing the people to kind of, walk half a mile or a mile across the terminal to get to their new gate, right? So I thought it was very interesting, very practical problem, and kind of huge implications on the day-to-day life of different travelers.
Is it going to get to the point? This made me think, like in stores, they put milk by diapers and that kind of stuff to get people to purchase more things. Are they going to do that with gate now? When they switch a gate, you're going to go by this pub that everybody's going to stop and spend a ton of money. They're going to get that smart on us?
Ideally, no. Ideally, you want to change to a gate that's very, very close by, so most of the people will be in the same seating area, right? They won't even have to get up, and you.
Hey, any book you're reading right now? I always like to see who's reading good books so I can put it on my list and then read it myself.
Sure. So, catching up on some to read material that I had kind of noted away. So I'm reading right now The Negotiation Genius by Deepak Malhotra and Max Bazerman. And I'm also reading The Goal, which is all about the theory of constraints and how do you provide recommendations in very constrained environments. And it actually applies that specific book is actually written for manufacturing, but it applies a lot to airlines and travel industry and logistics in general.
Oh, they're good. All right, good. We'll put those in the show notes. I got them on my list. From a data science perspective, anything, those that are data scientists out there that you'd recommend in terms of learning or where to go? I mean, some that you follow, whether it's a podcast or otherwise, that you recommend?
Right. So actually, we just came out with the Watson Data Platform blog on Medium. So I think everybody should really follow that. There's a lot of good material there on some generic topics on machine learning and data science. And there's some more specific topics on features of the Watson Data Platform and the IBM Data Science Experience. And another Medium blog is Inside Machine Learning, which again deals with different use cases and how you can potentially solve them using the IBM Data Science Experience. Fantastic.
Where can listeners reach you, but what's your preferred form of engagement?
Sure. So my Twitter handle is @YGamvros. That's @YGAMVROS. And linkedin.com/Gamvros.
All right. Anything that I left unsaid?
No, I think we covered quite a bit. Thanks, Al.
Hey, you don't listen to Yanni, do you?
I don't know.
I did mention that Kate, our producer, listens to Yanni, didn't I? She actually went to the concert. I mentioned that at the beginning, didn't I?
You did, yes.
All good. All right, and she'll probably cut it out. If you cut this out, I will be very upset. Hey, thank you so much for joining us today. This is informational. I'm going to go research some of the links in the blog that you'll give me. So thank you. I appreciate it. And for the listeners out there, I'll talk to you next time. Thanks, Yanni.
Thanks, Al. Great talking to you.
Thanks for listening to the Making Data Simple podcast, where we make data fun. Be sure to visit IBMBigDataHub.com/podcasts to access the show notes and uncover even more great episodes. Remember, the views expressed here are those of the host and its guests and do not necessarily represent the views of IBM. Until next time, over and